President Trump's days in the White House come to an end, he is being accused, amongst other things, of racing through a string of federal executions. His administration has carried out more than any other in 130 years of US history.
Well, this week the death penalty will be applied to 3 inmates in just 4 days. And bear in mind, Trump's only got 9 days left in office. Today, Lisa Montgomery will be the first woman to be federally executed since 1953 in the US. She was found guilty of a heinous crime, murdering a pregnant woman and removing her unborn baby. But joining us live from California is the attorney, Professor Sandra Babcock, who's campaigning for Lisa Montgomery and says that her mental state at the time means she should not be executed. Well, good morning to you and good evening to you where you are. Thank you for joining us. The nature of your client's crime is despicable and heinous and indefensible. That is inarguable. The question is, what was her mental state at the time and whether that would qualify her to be executed? I understand that is the debate.
That is correct. And you're absolutely right. Guilt is not an issue in this case. Lisa Montgomery confessed immediately after being arrested. The issue is really whether she has a rational understanding of whether she's going to be executed. This is a woman who is profoundly mentally ill after suffering a lifetime of sexual abuse, repeated rapes. She was trafficked as a child by her mother to men who would visit the house. Lisa Montgomery suffered unimaginable horror that led to her profound mental illness that renders her psychotic. That is really the question that we are facing today.
We don't have the death penalty here in the UK, so a lot of people watching this will be outraged that people are being executed anyway. There'll be others that think that we should have the death penalty. It's a very emotive issue. I've done a lot of, as says Susanna, lots of crime documentaries in the United States. And a lot of people are on death row, but very few have been actually executed. But under Trump, there's been a real escalation, and in particular, towards the end of his administration. Are you hoping, or are you hopeful, that you can get a stay of execution long enough for there to be a new president, Joe Biden, a new administration, and perhaps a new, more compassionate view of people like your client?
We are hopeful. In fact, a federal judge just a few hours ago entered a stay of execution in Lisa's case, finding that there needed to be a hearing to determine whether she was mentally competent to be put to death. It is possible that the government will still be able to carry out this execution, but we are hopeful because people across the country have been calling for the president to grant clemency to Mrs. Montgomery based on her history that is really unparalleled, an unparalleled history of sexual torture and trauma.
Sandra Babcock, I just wonder if I can ask, because Piers referred to it, Joe Biden, the new president, has said that he will end death penalty proceedings. I'm not sure what that means, because, of course, there is the federal death penalty, which is what Lisa Montgomery is under. But then there are individual states which issue the death penalty as well. Under the new president, what might be the future of the death penalty in the United States?
Well, you know, the use of the death penalty has been declining fairly steadily for the last several years. And this last spate of executions by the federal government has been truly anomalous. We had not had a federal execution for 17 years before they resumed in July of last year. And so what we're really seeing, I think, is the death now, no pun intended, of the federal death penalty. It is also the case that states have the death penalty, but increasingly they too are abandoning the practice. Juries are more reluctant to impose capital sentences. We have seen a number of states abolish the death penalty. And like the rest of the world, the United States is inexorably heading toward abolition. It is just taking a lot longer than it did in the UK or in the rest of the European countries.
Well, listen, it's a fascinating story. Lisa Montgomery is scheduled to be executed later today. So clearly the clock is ticking here and we will watch it with great interest. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much indeed.
You know, my view of the death penalty is it's like a lot of people, it's fluctuated over the years, but I remember interviewing members of the West Memphis Three, which if you don't know about it, go and Google it. Horrific story of 3 young teenage boys who all got arrested, charged and convicted with the despicable murder of 3 very young boys. And it turned out they did 27 years in prison. And it turned out had nothing to do with them. They were completely innocent. It was a local paedophile who had committed the crimes. And I interviewed 2 of the West Memphis Three, one of whom had to wear dark glasses 3 months after coming out of prison because of the nature of their crimes. He'd spent 27 years without any direct sunlight. He'd been treated, obviously, appallingly every time they went into any kind of, normal prison community. They were attacked. Appalling situation for 27 years of their lives. And yet for a crime they had nothing to do with. And that's the problem.
And if the executions had been carried out?
They would have been all dead, all killed for a crime they didn't commit.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll watch that with interest. It's been a real escalation. And the question, of course, Trump won't be giving this any thought whatsoever.
Nope.
But if you're involved in that case, it's obviously hugely important. And it's not about the guilt of the person. What she did was horrendous. But what had happened to her to affect her mental state was also horrendous. So it's an interesting case.